watching Social Distance Learning by ISBA. Get the kids together, learn something new, ask a few questions, and engage.
Good morning, Assalamu alaikum, and peace to you all. I'm Sadaf and you're watching ISBA's Social Distance Learning episode. And today's episode is going to be a step-by-step tutorial on how to create your own Islamic geometric pattern. The last time you saw me was last week on Tuesday, March 31st, where I gave you a quick intro on very short intro on Islamic art in general and Islamic geometric art, a little bit more emphasis on that. So I'm not going to go over all of that again. However, I think that if you want to go and see that video, it might be useful in understanding some of those concepts. That video can still be found on Facebook and YouTube. So please be sure to check that out if you haven't already. So today we are going to work on this 8-sided rosette that you see on the screen. So this 8-sided rosette, as we talked about last week, is an example of a 4-fold design. Basically what that means is that when you start making the design, the pattern, the circle has to be divided into 4 equal parts. And that's how the pattern starts. The reason I picked this design is because it's very commonly found in Islamic geometric art. You can see it in carvings as well as tile work on buildings and architecture. And it's a fairly easy design to make, and it covers all the basics of how to do the geometry, basically. So without further ado, let's get started. So, one more thing, actually. If you are unable to use a compass, I had added 2 templates on the links in the past few days. If you were able to print those, that's great. If not, then you can just follow along best as you can. If you were able to print those templates, I will tell you when to start basically working on the pattern. But as of right now, I'm going to start making the pattern from scratch from the first step, basically. So this is the pattern again that we're working on. And let me okay. So the first thing we're going to do, now I'm assuming that most of you will have a regular letter size paper, 8.5 by 11 to work on. Just to make it more clear, so you could see it clearly, I'm going to be working on a slightly larger piece of paper, but I think it should be fine if you use that letter size paper. Generally, it's fine if you use that. So what I'm going to do is, okay. So what you're going to need, first of all, is a ruler and a pencil. And let me see this. Trying to adjust, making sure you guys can all see. And for this episode, actually, if you have any questions or comments, you can also add them. And I will do my best to try to answer all of those during this episode. So, okay, first things first. Let's start with a horizontal line across the page. Now, I am working with the vertical side of the paper straight like this. Okay. All right. Okay. Now, just try to mark the middle of that paper. It doesn't need to be 100% smack dab in the middle of the paper. However, it's good if it is somewhat in the ballpark of middle. And you will see why that becomes useful later on. Okay, now comes the compass part. You place your compass onto that point. Now, I like to stay about couple of inches away from the border of the paper. So if your paper is 8.5 by 11, I would say maybe make the radius of the compass maybe like 2 inches or so, maybe 2.5 inches. That should be good. Okay. Mine, obviously, I'm working with a larger paper, so it's about 3 inches. Okay. Go ahead and draw this circle. I'm going over it a couple of times because I want to make sure that you all can see the circle. Okay. But for these initial steps, it would be useful if you don't draw them too dark, because you will see later on we'll have to erase most of these lines. So don't make them too dark at this point. Don't make them with pen or anything like that right now. Okay, so now that the circle is drawn, the points where the horizontal line that you drew intersects with the circle on, let's say, the right-hand side. We're going to do the same thing on both sides, but let's say on the right-hand side, put your compass at that point right there. Now for this, I usually like to increase the size of the radius of my compass. So draw an arc above and draw an arc below the circle, like so. Okay, do the same thing from the other side where the circle touches that line. Okay, now this gives you the exact vertical line perpendicular to the original line that we drew. And this is very important because if you don't have this angle be an exact 90 degrees, the whole pattern is going to shift and it's not going to be in square. So if you see me flipping over my ruler like this, it's because it's easier to slide it on paper like so. This cork board behind the ruler is there so it has a nice grip, but I like to do things a little differently. Okay, so you have 2 arcs intersecting here and 2 arcs intersecting here. You connect those 2 arcs, and if you did this correctly, it should pass through the middle of the circle right there. Right there. Okay. So now that that's done, you're going to go back to the original radius of that circle. So that's where this came in handy, to mark down the center of the circle. Okay. All right. So once you have that, go back to that spot where the circle intersected that horizontal line on the right-hand side and draw an arc above the circle on the side and below the circle also on that same side. Do the same thing from all 4 points of intersection between the perpendicular lines as well as the circle. Like that. Like that. The more accurately you do these parts, the more accurate and perfect your rosette will turn out to be in the end. Okay. All right. Once you're done with that, you should have ended up with 4 arcs. Again, in case you missed that, you place the compass with the same radius as the original circle on all 4 corners, like 1, 2, 3, and 4, and you draw arcs above and below. Oh, and I forgot this arc right here. There you go. Okay. So now we've ended up with 4 arcs. And we're going to connect those opposite ones. This point where this intersects, and this point where this intersects. These 2 intersect, I should say. Okay. And it should go through the center of the circle again. And in my case, it is. And you do the same thing with the opposite arcs. Okay. So now the circle has been divided into 8 equal parts. One more thing we're going to do is what's called squaring the circle. So you see the big circle in the middle. We're going to draw a square around it. And the way you do that, again, is by connecting the arcs that we just connected. But what we just did was we connected arcs opposite from each other. Right now, we're going to connect arcs one on top of the other like this. The midsections of those arcs. There's my eraser. This is where the eraser comes in handy. Okay. Let's remake that circle. Make sure this is accurate. Okay. Okay. What you're going to notice is that this line that I just drew is going to touch the very edge of that circle, the original circle. Okay. This should be a little bit lower for the exact square. Okay. So this is what you see in the template that I had given everyone to print out. This, what we just drew, is how you get to this template. So if you have the template, this is the time when you can start making the pattern with everyone else. So grab your template, or if you were drawing the whole pattern with me, just keep on working on that pattern. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we are going to connect. You see the original circle and where the lines intersect the original circle. Obviously, the circle has been divided into 8 equal parts. So there's 8 of those points. We're going to connect those 8 points going from one point to the other. Like so, you could start in the middle and connect it to the point right next to it. Like that. Okay. Connect the next one. The next one. And you keep going around the circle to do that. Oh, actually, my mistake. Since we're working within the square today, extend those lines whenever possible all the way to the edge of the square, basically. So when it comes to this line, you're connecting this line, this intersection to this intersection right here, but you will extend it all the way to the square up there. Same thing with this line over here. You're connecting this intersection with this intersection, but you are going to carry the line through all the way to the square, the edge of the square right there. And there's a reason why we do that. At the end, I'll show you, but I'll just tell you quickly that the reason we are doing this design within a square, and I've taught this pattern before without using the square, but it's, I think it's important to know how the pattern will tessellate into a larger pattern and design. So that's why we use the square, because what you'll see is in the end, if you have several of these patterns where the edges go all the way to the square, when you put them together, it makes a very nice tessellation. It makes the tessellation very easy. So that's why we use the square, and it'll become more apparent when I show you that at the end of the episode. Okay. So that's how you do that. Again, I'm drawing this very dark because I need everybody to be able to see this on camera, but you don't have to make these lines too dark. It'll make it harder to erase some of these lines. Okay. Right. Now I'm going on at the pace where I've seen most people be able to work. But obviously that's the beauty of having a video, is that if you feel like you're falling behind, you can always go back and rewatch the video and see any of the steps if you missed them. So I'm going to go ahead and just not work as fast as I usually do with this design, but I'm assuming that everybody is able to follow along easily. And there's a couple of things that you can do to make sure you're on the right track. For example, once you're done with this step, you should actually see an octagon in the middle of your circle. There's going to be lines obviously extending outwards from the square, but in the middle, what you see is an octagon. So if you have that and it looks symmetrical, then you're good. You're doing the right thing. Okay. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to draw a square within that octagon. So choose these two intersections and connect them. And do the same thing on the opposite side. Now, since I'm doing this on camera, I'm not going to be moving my paper around too much. But if it's easier for you to draw lines by turning the paper one way or the other, please feel free to do that. It's okay to do that. Okay. All right. So now you see the octagon, and now you see the square. We're going to draw another square. So the first square that we drew was called a static square because it's sitting on its bottom, basically. We're going to draw a dynamic square, which is basically a diamond. It's a square turned on its side, 45 degrees. So what we're going to do is we're going to draw another square using the other points left from the octagon. Now, if it makes it easier for you, this is the point where you can actually turn your paper like that. So you can draw the square. Again, I apologize if some of this stuff is very basic, but I'm trying to appeal to all ages, all age groups, at least the ones who are able to use a ruler, pencil, compass, all of that. So I have to explain some of the very rudimentary geometric things. So you see this square, and you see the other square. So now you've ended up with the octagon and two squares, the static square as well as the dynamic square. So this next step is where it's going to get a little bit tricky. But I promise you that in all Islamic geometric patterns, it gets tricky, and then where it gets the trickiest right after that is where the whole pattern starts to emerge, basically. So this is the trickiest part of it. However, this is the last step that's going to be tricky, and after which we can actually start putting together our entire pattern. So just do your best and try to, like, just be as observant as you can. This is where it can get a little bit, like I said, tricky, in the sense that there's going to be a lot of lines intersecting with each other. So again, I'm going to tell you how you can check to make sure you're on the right track. Okay, so the 2 points, actually not the 8 points where you see the 2 squares intersecting with each other, we're going to use those points. We're going to use the points that are across from each other to create parallel lines. So we're going to join, if you could see, where the dynamic and the static square meet, this point, this point. So I just, to show you guys, I'm going to use a marker for this point, but you don't have to do this. This is just so you can see which points are going to be connecting with each other. So these 2 points are going to be connecting with these 2 points across from them. And what you're going to do is you're going to take the line all the way to the octagon. Like so. And if you have done this pattern accurately up until this point, these 2 lines should be parallel. If they're not parallel, mistakes were made, I would say. So, okay. So this is where moving the paper might become useful. You could just keep the paper like this and work on the pattern, but just to make it very clear for everyone, I'm going to shift the paper. So, and excuse me for one moment while I grab another color marker to make it more clear. Okay, got it. All right. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to shift the paper like so. Okay. I'm going to use green to show you. I hope everyone can see the whole pattern clearly. Trying to adjust yeah, there you go. Thank you, Joe. Okay, so this point right here and this point right here, this point where the 2 squares meet, and this point right here where the 2 squares meet. Same thing as we did before. We're going to create 2 parallel lines, and remember to take them all the way to the octagon. Okay. Shift the paper again, makes it easier to see those points. Okay, I'm going to use this point and this point, this point, and this point. And it's really not tricky. Again, if you're working on a somewhat larger size circle, you should be able to see these lines pretty clearly. And again, accuracy is the name of the game. If you did this accurately, you should be able to see what you're connecting basically very easily. Okay. And so now you'll see dots on those same spots that we're going to connect, but I'm still going to use a different color right here. Yellow isn't really going to show on these other spots, but I'm just marking them so you can see. Okay. Let's see. So we actually made 8 lines. we created 8 parallel lines that are connecting the two squares, the dynamic and the static squares. One line is going like this. Two parallel lines are going like this and like this, diagonal, and then straight down and straight across like this. So I'm going to give you like a few seconds to catch up here. In the meantime, I'll tell you how to check and make sure that you have done this accurately so far. As you can see on my pattern, there are a lot of triangles. The whole circle is filled with triangles. All the lines intersect neatly. And basically, this is what's going to tell you if you did this accurately. You're going to see a star pattern emerge in the middle of the design. And if it's not emerging, that means that some of those parallel lines might be missing. Then I'm going to stay here for just a couple of more seconds. Okay. Now the next step, you can actually do this with a pencil, just make the lines darker. But I am going to use a red marker to show you the pattern. Basically, you're done drawing all the lines. The pattern is right there. Now we just have to emphasize the lines. So I'm going to actually do this freehand. It'll be easier for you to see. There won't be a ruler blocking the view. But please feel free to use a ruler since it might make your lines more accurate. So this is how you're going to emphasize the design. Actually, you know what? I am going to use a green marker instead of red. Generally, you see greens and blues used a lot more in Islamic geometric art. So let's see. Okay. So take the paper back to its original position, like so. And you see where the lines intersect. The two diagonal lines, the two sets of diagonal lines, the parallel diagonal lines that we just made, where they intersect, we're going to connect those points. Instead of me explaining it, showing it is an easier way to explain what we're doing right here. You're going to emphasize some lines and not the others. You're not going to go across on the triangles. The beauty of this design is that it kind of goes in, out, in, out, in, out like that. So there you go. If you were able to emphasize the lines to be able to make an 8-sided star in the middle of your circle, in the middle of your pattern, then you're on the right track. If not, then you might have missed some of these parallel lines that were supposed to have been drawn in the last step. Okay. So I hope everyone is at this step so far. Okay. And again, please, feel free to go back and look at this video again if you missed any steps or you're confused about something. And you can always add questions or comments on this live feed right now so you can get the answer right now. Okay, next step. Now we're going to emphasize part of those parallel lines. What we're going to do is we're going to go from the corner of the, I'm going to use a different color for this, corner of the 8-sided star that we just made. We're going to go from the corners of those to the points that we first that I first emphasized, where we drew the parallel lines from, basically. So this is, we're going to emphasize that line. But make sure not to take it all the way to the octagon this time. Actually, you know what? You do take it all the way to the octagon. My mistake. Just emphasize that line. Just take it all the way to the octagon. Same thing from this corner. Okay. Going to turn the paper slightly. Actually, for me, the easiest to draw straight lines is diagonally going up, but everybody is different. So there you go. Going from the corner of the 8-sided star over the parallel line all the way to the octagon. Do that all the way around for each corner of the 8-sided star. Now, there's no wrong way to emphasize lines. I, have taught this pattern quite a few times, and I have noticed that some people like to emphasize different lines, and they kind of try to do their own thing, which is fine. I'm just teaching the very traditional method in Islamic geometric art and the very traditional rosette that you see in Islamic geometric art. So, it's good to learn the exact process, and then you can go ahead and make your own changes to it as you wish. Okay. From the corner over those parallel lines all the way to the octagon. Okay. Turning the paper really helps me, at least, see the design clearly. And again, if you use a ruler, your pattern will be much more accurate. Again, I'm doing it freehand because it just makes it easier for everyone to see what I'm doing. But feel free to use a ruler for this. This, unlike other traditional art forms, unlike the other traditional art forms, using a ruler is encouraged in Islamic geometric art. In other traditional art forms, you're basically told, don't use rulers, try to do it freehand. So not the case in Islamic geometric art. Feel free to use a ruler to make your pattern more accurate. Okay, last line left. At least the last line in this step. So this is what you should have ended up with. Now we're going to emphasize the edges of that 8-sided rosette, and that will actually complete the pattern, besides, erasing the lines and such. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to start with the very top right here. The lines to avoid are the small section of lines between these two emphasized lines that you see right here. So this point, we're going to ignore that. Other than that, we're going to emphasize the rest of the octagon. There you go. Okay, don't extend it all the way across like this. And in this case, I extended it all the way to the square. Over here, obviously, it only went so far. Okay. go. Go. Okay. Actually, I'm going to extend this one all the way to the square. Same thing here. The paper I'm using is not really the best for marker use. So you see the lines bleeding a little bit, but hey, it's okay. Okay. So far, so good. Again, if you use the template for this, you should have had no problems making a very accurate design. And if you were not able to get a very accurate design, this is something to work towards. This is very essential in Islamic geometric art. Precision, lines intersecting at the right points, and the correct intersections, and the whole pattern being as symmetric as possible. Keep on connecting those lines like so. And there you have it. That is the completed pattern. Now at this point, you can choose to erase the lines, the rest of the lines. But if you worked only in pencil, then you can basically just leave it like that. I over here have another one I made last night. Same thing. As you could see, some of the lines have already been erased. I'm actually going to, I think, work on this one. I did not mention this in the tools in the last video that I added about the tools needed. But another useful tool to have on hand, it's not really a tool, is tracing paper. What tracing paper allows you to do is, instead of like erasing the construction lines and then later on, not knowing exactly how you drew the rosette and everything, you can actually just put the tracing paper on top and trace out the design on here, just the emphasized lines. So you can use that. But let's say I'm actually going to use the previous days, yesterday's rosette, and there's a reason why. But let's go ahead and erase all the construction lines. Actually, you know what? This one, I remember I actually had made the circle with a marker. Okay, back to the original pattern that I drew. I'm kind of going back and forth, and the reason is, one is on just regular paper. The other one that I made earlier is on watercolor paper. And watercolor paper is really fun because you can actually use watercolor pencils or watercolors to paint in the design. But that's okay. We will actually just use this. And the reason is because I can't erase the circle on the original pattern that I made yesterday. I made that in pen just for fun, I guess. So, okay, just go ahead and erase all the lines that you're not using. I know this is not the most fun thing to watch. Somebody erase all the lines. But it's part of the process, so what can you do? Okay. And by the way, I would love to see everybody's pattern. Either if you constructed that during this tutorial, or if you were able to construct it after. the tutorial ends, I would love to see it, and you can always post it on ISBA's event page for this episode, or just send it to me directly, whichever way. Okay, almost done with that. This is the kind of stuff you edit out on a video, but this is live, so you get to see all of this fun stuff behind the scenes. Okay. Okay, so this is our pattern, the 8-sided rosette. Oops, of course I forgot those lines. So I'm going to use the ruler. Forgot to emphasize the lines all the way to the square. I can still see it. So, okay, there you go. Okay. All right. Now this is the point where you can actually color in your pattern in any way. You can do 3 different colors. One's for the petals, one for the kites that you see right here, and one for the star in the middle. Now this is where I can show you why those lines extended at the edges were important. If you remember the other template I had asked you to print out, if you could. Basically, if we were to do the entire process that we just did on each one of these circles, we will end up with a pattern like this. This is the colored pattern. Obviously, this has 6 of these patterns instead of 4, as you can see. If I use just this template, I would end up with 4 of these rosettes. But right now you could see 6 of them put together. And now the reason why these lines are important, these lines at the edges, the square lines, I should make this down a little bit. There you go. These lines and these lines are important, is that when they come together in a tessellated pattern, they make these really cool star shapes, 5-sided stars in the middle. And you won't get that unless you extend the lines and make those lines within the square like that. So if you were to take this pattern, the original one we just made, repeat it 3 more times or 4 more times or 100 more times and put it together, you should end up with star shapes like this in the middle. Okay. All right. So I think, Joe, please let me know if we're okay on time. There's one short thing that I can actually show everybody. One more thing I should say that I could show everybody, but if we are short on time, I can skip that for this episode. I'm not going to show you how to make the pattern in a tessellated pattern using these 4 squares, but I would love to see it. It's the same exact process that we just did. If you made everything from scratch and did not use a template, you can just make the design 4 times, basically, one next to the other, and you will end up with a tessellated pattern like that. But if you are using a template, it's very easy. Just do the same process for each of these circles. Now, as you get more and more used to making patterns like this, you might be able to skip some steps because both of these circles, a lot of these lines could be drawn at the same time, like lines, diagonal lines, parallel lines like this, they can be drawn at the same time. So you don't have to do so much work over and over again. But I'm not going to show you that right now. Instead of that, I'm just going to quickly go over the weaving of the pattern. Okay, so I hope you're able to see this accurately. And I mean, I hope you're able to see all the details. So basically, the pattern that we just made, I made a similar pattern again. I did this beforehand. And what I did was I went ahead and doubled each of those lines. The way I did that was I put small circles around each of those joints or the intersections of that pattern. And then I made lines that basically touch the outside of those circles. Circles are not necessary. I just did that so all of my lines were the same thickness because the circles were of the same thickness. So I just did that. So what you see is a lot of intersecting lines like that. Make this darker. I wish this was a little bit darker so you could see better. But basically, this is where you can start weaving the pattern. So basically, it has to go over, under, over, under, over, under. So this is the first junction. You see right here, I already erased this part. So this arm of the pattern is going over the one underneath. So I'm going to erase the one underneath, but I'm going to keep these lines like that. Again, I'm freehand drawing this in the interest of time and just so you could see better right now. Okay. Now the next junction is the one right here. So since this one went over, this time it's going to go under the other arm. Like so. Okay. Okay. Again, the next junction is this one right here. Since it went under here, it's going to go over here. So like this. I wish there was a better way to just verbally explain this, but it's just much easier to see this. Picture is worth 1,000 words. So there you go. Like that. Okay. Then it turns around. And since it went over, it's going to go under the next arm. And it's going to go over the next arm. And if you attempt this, I would love to see this from you all. And if you have any questions, we still have some time. I can answer those questions for you. I can go over any of the steps in case you missed any, or if something wasn't very clear. I hope this time the transmission has been uninterrupted and going well. I think so. I think it's been going well. But sometimes there's a lag or something glitches and you skip a step. So please let me know if there's any questions. Okay. Okay. All right. So if you see, we're following the same thread basically. It goes over, under, over, and I should start emphasizing the opposite lines as well at this point, so you can see more clearly. Okay, so it goes over, under, over, and this one's going to be under. So which means this line is going to go over. Now, this part of the process is not necessary. There's many instances when this is not even done. It's just a straight up rosette, just like we just completed. But this is just something really nice to do when you're carving or there's a whole tessellated pattern with an emphasis on the borders. So, you know, it's good to know the process basically. So, okay, it goes over, under, it'll go over on this side. It'll go under here. I'm trying to do this quickly. Under, then I'll go over. It'll go under. And it'll go over here. And this I'm actually drawing on tracing paper. That original pattern that I made yesterday, I just basically put a tracing paper over it and I traced out the design rather than having to draw it all over again. So you can do that too. Okay, under, then this goes over. Let's see, under, over, under, over. Let's see. All right. So basically, you keep that going all the way around the whole design. And I'm just lightly shading some of the parts to show you how the weaving will work. Same, over, under, over. Okay, so are there any questions while I'm working on this? Okay. Again, this is being done very roughly just to show you the process. And I don't have the graphic right now. I did show it in the last episode on Tuesday, March 31st, but I don't have it today where I actually show the picture of the weave pattern, but I can add it later on if you like to see that. Okay, so this is where I made the mistake. Since this arm went over, this is where it's going to go under. There you go. And this is going to go over right here. Yeah, that one. Thank you, Joe. You found the graphic. You could see that. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Say it again. Okay. All right. So basically, it just keeps going like that all the way around. Let's see. Okay. I'm told that it's okay to go ahead and finish this, so I'm going to try to work as quickly as I can. I hate leaving an unfinished pattern. There's something very satisfying about finishing a pattern after you've put in all the work, drawing all the lines, drawn all the angles and everything. It's just satisfying to just go ahead and complete it. So again, this part of the process isn't necessary, but you know, if you like to just watch me work at this for right now, please feel free. In the meantime, I'll tell you that the next episode will be on this coming Tuesday, which will be, what's the date on that? It will be the 14th of April, and it will be by Dr. Uzma Jaffrey. It will be about the women in Islam. It's a wonderful topic. There's so many great women in the history of Islam, and general population, you know, people are not really aware of that. So it's a wonderful topic, and I'm looking forward to that. So please join in at 11 a.m. on Tuesday, the 14th of April for that. Okay. Let's make sure I haven't made any mistakes. So it goes over, under, right there, over, under, over, under, over, and under. I wish there was a tally for how many times I have said over and under in this episode. Okay, let's see. All right. So over, that should go under. We're almost there, guys. Almost. Just going to shade that in. Okay. This worked out. Over. Again, if you do this carefully, it should work out where everything just basically is perfectly weaved. There's no two consecutive junctions where it's over, or two consecutive ones where it goes under. It should be like a perfect basket weave. Okay. All right, almost done. Okay. All right. Okay, I think that this is pretty much it. I think we finished the weaving, and this is the part where I can just use the ruler real quick. To emphasize the design so you could see. Like that. Okay. Like that. I wish I could work in pen and marker only, just so it's very visible on camera. However, because we have to erase the lines and all that, I have to work in pencil. So I apologize if it's a little bit too light. But basically, this is it. Once you have weaved the design, you can emphasize the border lines and erase everything else. Okay. I think this is pretty much it. It will take a while longer to finish the whole emphasis of the lines, but I will leave you to it. I just want to show you quickly the same pattern can be done in many different ways to make many beautiful designs. This is the same pattern that we just made. It's done with like a collage of papers. This is done in watercolor. This one I made in a circle, so the edges are a little bit different. They're not tessellated into proper like eight-sided stars, eight-sided rosettes, I should say. There's many different things you could do. It's a very common pattern within Islamic geometric art. So that was it. And like I mentioned before, you can go ahead and color your design. You can make it. Please send it to me if you were able to follow the tutorial. If you have any questions, let me know. And thank you again to Joe Balian for helping me with all the slides and the tech support and everything. And next Tuesday, April 14th at 11 a.m., Dr. Uzma Jafri will be on this episode of ISPA's Social Distance Learning to tell you about the women in Islam. And thank you all for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum, and peace to you all.